Coming up this week on Sporting Journal Radio. Hey, it's Bret Amundson. Join myself and Dan Amundson this week on Sporting Journal Radio as we unlock Lyme disease with Dr. Bill Rawls.
I think there's a link between these low-grade chronic infections with intracellular microbes and every chronic illness out there.
Also, Randin Olson unlocks early season walleyes with some tips for you.
2 foot of water. There's fish up there.
And Joe Henry talks about finding fish in high water at Lake of the Woods.
Finding some slack water closer to shore, and they could go in there with, like a half-ounce jig and do just fine in that slack water.
We're not just a radio show anymore. Hunt, fish, listen, repeat. Broadcasting from the Camp Grilling Studios, this is Sporting Journal Radio. Presented by OnX. Know where you stand with OnX. That's a new personal best pike here. Now here's your host, Bret Amundson. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for being here with us today on the show. We got a lot to get to, including unlocking Lyme. Lyme disease sucks. I don't like it. It scares me. There's wood ticks everywhere. I've been picking them off my dogs lately like crazy. And of course, a lot of this listening area deals with deer ticks. I was down south where I had to deal with the Lone Star tick. So tick-borne illnesses freak me out a little bit. So we're going to talk to Dr. Bill Rawls, and he is the author of Unlocking Lyme. It's a free book that you can get right now through the month of May. He's got a new book coming out next month. We're going to talk to him about Lyme disease. He battled it himself. We'll talk about how he treated it and just the struggle with Lyme disease that people have, whether it's a debilitating condition that they deal with or just getting it diagnosed. That's a struggle as well. We're also going to get a fishing report from Joe Henry. We'll talk about what water levels are like up at Lake of the Woods. We'll talk about some of the sturgeon fishing that's going on up there right now. And then Randin Olson, too, will join us from Otter Tail Lakes Country to talk about where he's finding walleyes and what he's using, because shiners have been hard to come by, so he has resorted to using something different. He's going to tell us what that is in just a little bit. That's Dan Amundson right over there. Dan, how you doing?
Doing well.
Who is this week's show brought to us by?
This week's show is brought to us by Haybale Heights Campground and Resort. Book a trip to Devil's Lake. Learn more at haybaleheights.com. Otter Tail Lakes Country. Find your inner otter this summer at ottertaillakescountry.com. Lake of the Woods Tourism. Lake of the Woods is the walleye capital. Plan a trip for this summer at lakeofthewoodsmn.com. Camp Grayling. Catch the Grand Slam. Lake trout, pike, grayling, and walleye. Fish Camp Grayling in Saskatchewan this summer. Ooh. OnX Hunt. Know where you stand with OnX. Mid-Migration Outfitters. Come hunt waterfowl this fall out of heated 10-man pits and comfortable blinds. Learn more at midmigrationoutfitters.com. And Prairie Sportsman, the new season is wrapping up. Check your TV guide. You're going to talk about this soon.
Going, Dan?
That one trips me out. You explain it.
Yeah, Prairie Sportsman. It is on so many different PBS stations around the region. It airs, I think, around 400 times. Of course, you can watch all the episodes on our YouTube channel, and you can watch some stuff on Facebook too. But if you want to, or if you've got family members that don't do YouTube or whatever, you like watching it on TV, the Minnesota channel just carried our turkey hunting episode on Thursday, and then TPT Life, if you're in the Twin Cities, they're going to carry our Prairie Stewards show on Saturday at 12:30. That features Roger Strand and what he's done to manage deer on his property. Also, Brad and Christy Fernholz and what they've done to restore some native prairie on their property. It's a really great episode. Otherwise, gosh, there's, like I said, just check your local listings. If you're up in Brainerd and Bemidji, Lakeland PBS, we've got our brook trout episode coming up Saturday at 2:30. If you're in Wyoming, you can watch it on the Wyoming PBS channel. They got our turkey hunt on Sunday. If you're in Iowa, they've got our ice climbing episode on the Iowa PBS. If you're in Duluth, WDSE, you can watch the show Saturday at 4 o'clock, and it's Life on Lac Parle. So wherever you are right now, you can probably watch us on any of the PBS websites too. Any of the PBS stations in the country you can watch Prairie Sportsman at. So find out more at prairiesportsman.org. Wow. Check out our YouTube channel. It's kind of wild. Not quite as wild as the storm we encountered last Thursday. It was bad. It was bad. A lot of people are going to be cleaning up from that storm for a long time. There were some tragedies that took place during the storm. It was wild.
this storm hit so fast, and I was cleaning a turkey that I'd shot earlier, and Dan had just moved 2 vehicles and 2 boats from right where that tree fell that you're looking at right there. He literally ran down to where he had parked his truck to grab his phone. Those trees were standing. He turned around to run back to the house. Those trees were on the ground. That's how fast it happened. Dan, what went through? We can't play the audio.
Well, yeah, that's not radio safe, but don't be as dumb as me. You don't need your phone that bad. I mean, it's nice to have communication, but don't run out in 100-mile-an-hour winds to grab your phone. That was stupid in retrospect. But honestly, there wasn't much running through my head except get down there and get back as fast as you can, because all you could hear was a train running in the distance or on top of you, which was not a train. It was pretty wild, and I ran really fast with the wind. You get a 100-mile-an-hour tailwind. You can fly. It's kind of fun. But yeah, don't be that dumb, please.
I'd never heard that train sound before, and I've heard that people say that, a tornado sounds like a train. I'd never heard it before. And I was sitting out there and I was cleaning my turkey. They had I'll tell you, give meteorologists a hard time and weather predictors a hard time all you want, but they had predicted some very severe weather in this part of the state a few days earlier. So they kind of nailed it, and we knew it was coming. We could see it coming. But I was like, I'm plucking my turkey, and I'm like, Dan, you should probably move those boats in case we get some hail, move the vehicles, whatever, get stuff out. Maybe a tree might fall. We should move that stuff away from it, not thinking that trees were actually going to fall. And I set up my camera and tripod to film that storm rolling in. And this is what I captured on that time lapse. Look at that thing come. And it got to about there, and Dan had moved all the vehicles, and he looks at me and goes, we have to go right now. Like, it was on top of us. And we heard, I remember hearing the train. I'm like, wow, the train is running today. And I'm sitting there plucking this turkey, wondering, I wonder how safe a train would be in 100-mile-an-hour winds, And then I realized it wasn't an actual train that I was hearing. It was that storm coming. And I grabbed the camera, ran inside, grabbed that bird, ran inside. Dan forgot his phone, so he turned around, ran down to get his phone. Those trees fell, and then we waited the storm out in the basement while I cleaned turkeys. And we lost some shingles. My wheelbarrow got smashed, but other than those 2 trees, and those 2 trees were great. I'm going to miss those trees, but we were pretty lucky that we didn't get any damage. Even that vehicle there just got some scratches from that one tree. But
unfortunately,
yeah. But we got lucky. So it was a crazy storm, and we did not need more rain around here. I've got roads washed out all around me, water flowing over the roads all around me. The Minnesota River is high, Rainy River is high. The Red River, so I was looking at Brad Durek on Facebook, and he posted some pictures from up by Oslo. Red River, he said the Red River is 6 to 8 miles wide. Up north of Grand Forks up there. It is crazy. They got a dike for a mile along I-29 to keep the river from flowing over the road. I've watched that area around Oslo flood a lot, and Drayton, and even Grand Forks and Fargo for that matter. They've had their issues with the Red River, of course. I don't know if I can remember it ever being 6 to 8 miles wide up there that far. It's a bad deal. So Brad, thanks for... we kind of stole those pictures from Brad, so
sorry.
Thanks, Brad. Sorry. On another note, though, the wet conditions and these warm temps have allowed us actually to go out and do some foraging. I've heard about morels popping up, and we actually went out and got our first batch of asparagus, which I think we were a little late to the game on asparagus, but asparagus was coming up, and ramps have been coming up too. So if you're a wild food forager, there are some good edible wild foods out there making appearances finally. We've been waiting for it for a long time, and man, we were all excited about fishing opener last weekend, Dan, and you did go. I didn't. You did fish up at Leech. It was a good opener for you.
Yeah, I'll take it. We had fish. We kept enough for a meal and threw some back, so that was great.
Yeah, I got to eat some fresh fish that you caught. Thank you very much, or that you brought back, which was good.
You're used to that.
I didn't fish. I mean, we didn't have power during the opener, so we were doing some storm cleanup, and then I had a film job with Art Diaz. Actually, Art came to town and got to hang out with Art all weekend. Thank you very much for coming to town. It was very cool. Got to learn more about Al Claire Outdoors, which is some custom hearing protection, which hearing protection is very important. And I'm sure you'll hear us talk about it much more because Art and then Mark Musselman, the CEO at Al Claire Outdoors, will be on the show coming up in the future to tell us more about how you can protect your hearing when you're out there hunting. But I'm excited to finally do some fishing and get on the water. And in just a couple of weeks, Dan, we're going to be heading north of the border up to Canada. I'm so excited. I can't wait. This will be your first experience at Tasman.
That's how excited we are.
I know you're jacked to get up there. And for all of you making your plans for Canada, we'll talk more about crossing the border with Joe Henry coming up later in the show and what the requirements are. But you have to still, at this point, and it seemed like every month they change things a little bit, but at this point you still need your vaccination shot, and you don't have to have a pre-entry COVID test, but you have to have the shot, you have to be able to prove it, and you have to upload it to the ArriveCan app. And what the ArriveCan app does is basically stays in touch with you while you're in Canada. I know it was so that if you had COVID and you were spreading it around, they could track you with it. But they have a new version of the ArriveCan app. So if you went to Canada or if you've downloaded it and you are about to go to Canada again, you're going to need to re-download a new version of the ArriveCan app. They just released one here a couple of days ago this week. So you can find out more. Just Google Canadian government and border crossing. And you'll get all the info right there. All right. Ticks are big right now. If you've been turkey hunting, if you got dogs outside, it's important to be preventative when it comes to ticks and to know what to do if you are bitten. To learn more about it, we've got a doctor that knows a lot about Lyme from personal experience. He's the author of Unlocking Lyme. It's Dr. Bill Rawls, and he'll join us next on the show.
Northern Minnesota's Walleye Factory is a year-round world-class fishing destination. The perfect getaway this summer is just a short drive to Lake of the Woods. Fish Big Traverse Bay, the Rainy River, or visit the unique Northwest Angle. To catch big fish, you have to go where the big fish are. Plan your trip to Lake of the Woods at lakeofthewoodsmn.com. That's lakeofthewoodsmn.com.
All right, well, May is Lyme Awareness Month, and Lyme disease and avoiding ticks and dealing with ticks has been a topic of this show many times because we feel it's a pretty important issue. I'm freaked out about Lyme disease. I also went south on a recent trip where I encountered a Lone Star tick, so I'm a little freaked out about being allergic to red meat. And it's such a big topic, but it's so hard to get a lot of information about it and how to diagnose it, how to treat it, what the symptoms are, because it can be so different for different people. And it's been hard to get a doctor on this show to talk about it as well too. So we've had a lot of people on that have talked about dealing with Lyme disease and the symptoms. We've had people that have friends. We have had people that have dogs. Our family's had dogs that have dealt with it. It's an important topic. And finally, we've got a doctor on the show. I'm really excited about this, Dr. Bill Rawls. He's from North Carolina, and he joins us here on the show right now. Doctor, thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, my pleasure. Absolutely.
Why, right off the top, why is it so hard for a guy like me that has Lyme disease as a topic so often? Why has it been so hard for me to find a doctor to come on the show?
Because doctors really don't understand what it is, and they don't have anything to treat it. So when you have something that you can't really treat, you just as soon ignore it, not talk about it, not hear about it. So I'm in the know just because I struggled with it for a number of years, ultimately overcame it, and have spent the past decade or more of my life really understanding what it is and how we overcome, how we deal with this thing. And my conclusions are quite a bit different than the mainstream.
So you were a medical doctor for a number of years. Were you how aware of Lyme disease were you? Was it on your radar at all? Or once, and when did you realize that you'd gotten Lyme disease?
I was aware of it from the beginning, but I can't say that I understood it any more than anybody else did. But I probably picked up the microbes that are defined as being associated with Lyme disease when I was a kid. I mean, I spent my whole life in the woods when I was a child, climbing trees, going through creeks, later hunting, fishing. I mean, truly, I was in the woods a high percentage of my life, and ticks were a fact of life. You get bitten a lot. So, but that's the deal. I didn't get sick until I had been doing obstetrics call, which was really extremely demanding every second or third night, and just running a really, really high stress lifestyle for years. And finally, in my late 40s, I crashed and first identified with fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, because nobody could really figure out what was going on. And it was much later that I defined it as resulting from these microbes that we define as Lyme disease. Since then, my definition of what Lyme disease has really warped into something completely different. But it was all that stress for years, and I crashed.
So you basically lived with it for a long time, and then when your immune system was maybe weakened, it finally took over.
That's it. No doubt about it. It's our immune system is really key, but the health of our cells of our body is really key too. And the fact of the matter is, we have microbes coming at us all the time. Microbes are trying to constantly cross our skin or through our GI tract, or breathing them in. So we constantly have microbes that are entering our body. And this idea that we get an infection, we become symptomatic, and then we either take antibiotics or not, but the symptoms clear, that the microbes are gone, turns out to be quite a misconception. That most of the things we're exposed to as we go through life, we end up keeping dormant in our tissues, and those things can reactivate later. And that includes the microbes that are associated with Lyme disease. So the deal is, most people who get a tick bite that are carrying the microbes, the Borrelia microbes associated with Lyme disease, don't become acutely ill. If you're healthy, you can get bitten by ticks, pick up the microbes, and carry them for a long time. In fact, 90% of the people that I've talked to that identify as having chronic Lyme disease don't remember a tick bite and don't remember becoming ill around the time of a tick bite.
I feel like that's one of the hardest parts about it, because it's not that, like, just like you said, it's not that typical, oh, I'm sick, let's go to the doctor and fix it. It's something that may come so much later in life. And I've got some friends that their philosophy right now is avoid ticks at all costs, wear the right clothing, wear some sort of, protective chemical, permethrin, whatever. But if they get bit and they don't notice it right away, and it might go a day or so, go straight to the doctor and get doxycycline. Don't even hesitate. Don't take any chances. Obviously, they're not doing that often. It's one of those, hey, I'm not going to take a chance, type of deal. But they feel like it's, and I've done it. I got bit last year by a deer tick, and I didn't see it right away, and it left a pretty good mark on my body. And I was on a trip, and I came home and I said, well, I don't want to mess around with this. I went straight to the doctor, got my 2 pills of doxycycline, and so far I've had no ill effects from it.
Right. That's one way to deal with it. That's not how I deal with it, but that's one way to deal with it.
As a doctor, what do you say about that sort of? I mean, it's almost like an emergency treatment in a sense.
Sure. Yeah. Well, first of all, there's not really any evidence to support that it does much of anything. And second, the idea that doxycycline eradicates the microbes from the body is also a misconception. There are many documented cases of people receiving antibiotics and not clearing the microbe from their system. So it's really up to your immune system. It's a lot about your immune system, the strength of the cells of your body, and all of those are really, really important factors. So here's the deal. When you get bitten by a tick, the microbes flood into your bloodstream, all right? So we don't often get sick because ticks have been biting humans since the beginning of time, and Borrelia, the microbe that causes Lyme disease, it's not a new microbe. It's millions of years old. So humans have been getting bitten by ticks carrying the Borrelia microbe ever since there have been humans. I mean, it's not a new thing. So our immune system recognizes this microbe when it enters our system. When something causes severe acute illness, it means that the immune system doesn't have any defenses. So Ebola virus is devastating because humans have never been exposed to it. We have no built-in defenses, and it hits the bloodstream, it ravages the whole body. Tick-borne microbes, ticks have been biting us for a long time, and we have some familiarity. So as soon as the microbes are hit the bloodstream, the immune system is mopping them up. White blood cells gobble them up and to try to get rid of the microbes. The microbe strategy, the bacteria strategy, though, is getting to your tissues, all of your tissues, your brain, your heart, your joints, your muscles, every tissue in the body. And what is interesting about these microbes is they infect and live inside cells. So they all have the capacity to live inside cells, in fact, stay dormant in cells. So the microbe strategy is getting to cells in tissues of the body. The immune system strategy is to try to eliminate them. For the most part, the immune system is successful. And I generally don't have people getting acute Lyme disease unless they have a big load of microbes. The tick's been embedded for a long time, or they get bitten by a lot of ticks all at once. Bigger microbe load. But even when you have a low load or take antibiotics, some microbes make it. They get their destination. They get to your tissues. And when they do that, they bore into your cells. And so it's like a little peppering of your tissues. And if it's a small peppering and your immune system is healthy, they can be there and you can be healthy and not even know they're there for years. And that's okay with the microbe because all they want to do is get a little food. Your cells are basically their food source, and stay dormant in your tissues until another opportunity comes along to pass to another tick. And that is natural. That's the way it's supposed to be, right? So interestingly, back in the 90s, National Geographic was on an expedition that they found a thawed out human out of a glacier that was 5,300 years old in the Italian Alps. So this guy was crossing the Italian Alps at his mid-40s. Somebody shot him in the back with an arrow. He had Borrelia in his system. So this microbe's been around a long, long time. Generally doesn't make people that sick unless you get stressed. And the thing about it is our modern lifestyles are really stressing us a lot. So we're seeing a lot more Lyme disease. And,
yeah, I mean, something that's been around for that long, yet I feel like Lyme disease hasn't been around. It's probably been around, but I feel like it's just starting to get a lot of headlines now. Yep. I mean, what is it? Just been misdiagnosed? Is it this? Are the symptoms mimicking so many other illnesses that doctors have been misdiagnosing it?
Right. Quite frankly, before it was recognized as an illness and for a lot of things, and this is still true, there are a lot of illnesses that aren't diagnosed as microbial that we really don't know the origins of the illness. And so, but it has been recognized. The classic bullseye rash, the EM rash, doctors have been talking about that for hundreds of years. So it wasn't defined as a thing until the Lyme, Connecticut incidences when they were a cluster. But here's some interesting tidbits about that. So this microbe is called Borrelia burgdorferi. It was named after a guy named Burgdorfer, who was a microbiologist. He was from Switzerland, I believe, but he was working in the United States, and he was the one that received the specimens. He was a specialist in rickettsia, which is one of the microbes that causes Rocky Mountain spotted fever. And he was looking for the cause of these people's illnesses. And what he found was there were a lot of microbes there in every specimen. And there were almost as many rickettsias of a species of rickettsia that lives in New England as Borrelia. So he did make the conclusion through his research that the Borrelia was the cause of the EM rash, or the bullseye rash. But in his later writings, he was speculating that possibly the acuteness of the illness was probably associated with a co-infection with rickettsia. So even Lyme disease isn't straightforward, and anybody with chronic Lyme disease will tell you there are a lot of co-infections. There's Bartonella and Babesia and Anaplasma and Ehrlichia and Rickettsia and dozens of species of each one of those. So what it turns out is ticks carry a lot of different microbes that are infectious. So it's not just Lyme disease. They found that one tick species can carry 237 different families of bacteria. So all of those aren't pathogens, but a lot of them are. So what it turns out is there's a lot of stuff we don't know about still. And when you look at the possibilities of microbes that can cause low-grade chronic illness, we're just scratching the surface.
Man, so I've seen connections. You bring up fibromyalgia. I've seen connections between Lyme and fibromyalgia. I've seen. I swear I saw at one point somebody tried to draw a link to ALS. Maybe.
Parkinson's, all of them.
So, do you think that those are like a tick may have caused some of that for some of those people, or what's the link?
Yep. The link is, I think there's a link between these low-grade chronic infections with intracellular microbes and every chronic illness out there. Every single one. Yeah, they've even found Borrelia in breast cancer cells and other microbes in various kinds of cancer cells. There's a close microbe cancer connection. And yes, they found Borrelia in quite a number of different situations. So let me tell you about a case study out of Columbia University talking about the antibiotic thing. So there was a woman that was diagnosed with Lyme disease. She had an acute tick bite. She had an EM rash. She did have symptoms. She was treated with doxycycline at about age 54. Treated with doxycycline, her symptoms gradually resolved with treatment of the doxycycline. 2 or 3 years later, she developed neurological symptoms. So they treated her with 6 weeks of IV antibiotics. She tested positive again for the Borrelia microbe, and all they were looking for was Borrelia. So she tested positive for the microbe in her system again. They treated her with 6 weeks of IV antibiotics and 6 months of doxycycline.
Wow.
They stopped the antibiotics because her symptoms were worsening instead of improving. Her situation gradually deteriorated. In her early 60s, she died of what they defined as Lewy body dementia. But she agreed before death to do an autopsy. So they did an autopsy of her brain, and they found live Borrelia microbes in her brain.
Really?
So that's what antibiotics do.
Or don't do. I mean, so what do you recommend if somebody does go in and has the bullseye or has been bitten? Is there a better option than doxycycline, or is it we're going to try this, but it may not work?
How I recovered from my illness, and by the way, as far as when you're looking at fibromyalgia and these different illnesses, Basically, the only difference that I see between a person labeled as fibromyalgia and a person labeled as chronic Lyme disease is the person with chronic Lyme disease has figured out to get somehow to get a positive test for the microbe. That's about the
Interesting. I wondered about that.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of crossover, and I think these microbe chronic illness connections run deep. I've actually just written a new book. I have a book called Unlocking Lyme that explains Lyme disease, but I wrote a new book connecting the microbes and chronic illness that will be called the Cellular Wellness Solution that will be out this June. So if anybody's interested in taking a little bit deeper dive, there's some really interesting research in there. So moving on to things that do work. The problem with doxycycline is it doesn't get to inside cells very well. So it's not killing these microbes after they're deeply embedded in tissues. But what it does do, even 10 days of doxycycline really disrupts the gut very, very badly. 6 weeks of doxycycline or any other antibiotics will absolutely destroy the gut, which inadvertently destroys your immune system, which isn't a good idea. So there is no evidence that long-term use of antibiotics is supported for the use for treating chronic Lyme disease, and I agree with that. As far as an acute tick bite with an EM rash or symptomatic, then I think the 20 to 30 days of doxycycline is a reasonable thing to do, because it helps knock down the microbes while they're coursing through the bloodstream before they get embedded in tissues. Once they're embedded in tissues, and again, you're not going to prevent that completely. If you've been bitten by ticks, you've had tick-borne microbes of some type in your system every single time you've ever been bitten. That's how it is. So the doxycycline does help initially. I think the CDC recommendations are reasonable. There's not a lot of evidence that the 200 milligrams one shot thing does a whole lot. I don't think it does a lot of harm, though, so I don't think it's unreasonable to do. I don't stop there, though. And what I used for my recovery was herbal therapy, a lot of herbal therapy. And what it turns out is herbs, plants, all have antimicrobial properties. And if you think about it, they have to. Plants have to defend their cells from being invaded by viruses, bacteria, protozoa, just like we do. And so plants don't have a cellular immune system. They have a chemical defense system that's very robust. And it isn't to one microbe, it's to a huge spectrum of microbes. So all plants have antimicrobial properties. All herbs have antimicrobial properties. But depending on the plant's environment and the amount of microbe stress in the environment, some plants have stronger antimicrobial properties than others. But it's not a single chemical substance like doxycycline or amoxicillin or penicillin or any of the antibiotics. It's hundreds of chemicals that hit various kind of microbes in a variety of ways. So it's an entire defense system. And what's most interesting about the herbs, however, is they are selective. So the plant chemicals, these what we call phytochemicals, are selective. It's a system. So they kill pathogens, but they don't kill normal flora, which means you can take these herbs for months or even years without destroying your normal flora and enhancing your cellular health and balancing this total microbiome in the body, which we're finding actually extends into our tissues and even into our brain. Yes, we have microbes, bacteria that live in our brain all the time. So that's the advantage of the herbs. So I've been taking herbs continually now for about 15 years.
Okay, so I was going to ask that question for somebody like you or myself that spends a lot of time in the outdoors and encounters ticks frequently. Would you recommend just taking cat's claw and Japanese knotweed on a regular basis?
Yep. I think it's a very reasonable thing to do.
Okay. So
I've been doing that and other herbs for many, many years.
So you have, and I'm reading them off your website, rawlsmd.com, and that's RAWLSMD.com. You have recommendations on here about what are the top herbs to get, and you would just take them as a preventative or as somebody that's had Lyme disease, probably to help you along the way as well. And then you even break down how to take them, like making your own capsules.
Yeah, it's pretty easy to do. And again, there are herbs that you wouldn't want to take long term, and that is one of the things that I distinguish in my new book that's coming out this June, the Cellular Wellness Solution. I talk about when just to take just average herbs for protecting your health, and when to use those herbs with stronger antimicrobial properties. But here's the deal. Let's look at Japanese knotweed. So this is an invasive weed. It's really common in North America now. It comes from Asia, and it is an exceptionally good source of resveratrol, which you might recognize is what we find in grapes. It's what comes in red wine that gives wine health benefits. So it's protective of the vascular system. It's a potent antioxidant that protects cells throughout the body. It has antimicrobial properties itself, but the Japanese knotweed has this spectrum of other chemicals too that have remarkable benefits. So you look at the list of benefits of taking Japanese knotweed every day, and it's impressive. Do the same for cat's claw, andrographis, any of the other herbs that I've mentioned here. Now, there's some that you don't want to take every day, like echinacea, elderberry, because they overstimulate the immune system. They're great for a common cold. But these herbs are what we define as immune modulating. They have an effect on the immune system that's balancing, which really has some wonderful effects.
We should mention, too, that your last book, Unlocking Lyme, you're doing a book giveaway with that right now?
Yeah.
So
yeah, we do this every year. It's just part of my way of reaching the audience and helping people out. So for Lyme Awareness Month, we give the book away just for shipping and handling.
Oh, that's great. And that's available on your website, rawlsmd.com. And then for finding these herbs, is that something a person can order them online and get them delivered somehow?
Yeah, they can order them online. I'm medical director at an herbal company that we have packages of herbs that you can do, packages that help people with Lyme disease. So, but there are a lot of good sources of the herbs out there. Okay, so we can get some of those off your website too? The website for the supplements is vitalplan.com, but it has just specific products. Okay, vitalplan.com. All right, I want to talk about a couple of other illnesses and some of the other ticks out there, because there's a number of different types of ticks. And on our recent trip south, we spent some time in Missouri, and we were armed with this new gear from Sitka. It's called the Equinox Guard Collection, and they have there's like I don't know if they call it a gaiter or a sleeve inside your leg, so you tuck it into your socks, so if something does crawl up underneath your pant leg, it can't get through. The thread is woven tightly so the mosquitoes aren't supposed to be able to bite through it. And then it's got their insect shield baked into it, which is permethrin. And we spent 8 days of crawling through the woods, sitting against a tree, walking through tall grass, and did not have any ticks on us. And one of the guy's dogs was running around a little bit during the day when we were hanging out. We were constantly pulling ticks off the dog, so we knew that they were there. And then there was one instance where I had taken off the clothing that was treated and was just wearing regular clothing, and I was taking some pictures along the shoreline of this lake. And all of a sudden, one of my buddies pointed and said, "Hey, you got a tick crawling on the back of your leg there," and pulled it off. And sure enough, it was one of these Lone Star ticks. And that was my first
we don't have them here in Minnesota. So that was my first encounter. And while Lyme disease scares me, I have a severe case of being nervous about catching a red meat allergy. So I was a little nervous about that tick right there. So how common is that with that tick right there? And is there more illnesses that are more common with it?
Well, there are other illnesses. It does carry rickettsia species and other things. And quite frankly, again, we are just discovering all the different microbes that are carried by different kinds of ticks. Lone Star tick is associated with starry, which is the southern version of Lyme disease. So they haven't traced out the bacteria yet, but they think it's just a different species of Borrelia. By the way, when I was writing Unlocking Lyme about 4 years ago, they had found 12 different species of Borrelia that can cause Lyme disease. Now that list is up to 21. So like I said, there's just a lot of things out there that we don't know about. So every tick carries bacteria that can infect you. So all ticks are suspicious. So I think the new kinds of clothing make a lot of sense. I don't use strong chemicals like DEET, but because they're pretty toxic, I've found that the essential oils, essential oil sprays of those, there are various kinds, work just as well as DEET. And quite frankly, I'm not a hunter anymore. I do fishing, but I do a lot of hiking. I'm out in the woods a lot. Now, I don't immerse myself quite as much as a hunter would, but I tell you, since I've been taking the herbs, I just don't seem to be as palatable to ticks and mosquitoes as I used to be. It's interesting, and it's thought that these things are balancing or affecting the flora on your skin. So the bacteria, the ticks and mosquitoes hone in on heat, but they also hone in on scents that the bacteria on your skin are producing too. So it's so all of those things have play into the picture. So anything you can do to decrease your bites, not just from ticks either, because chiggers and virtually any insect that bites. I mean, think about it. Bacteria want to pass from host to host. What better way of doing that is than through an insect vector that's biting through skin and depositing them right into the bloodstream. So whether it's ticks, chiggers, mosquitoes, fleas, lice, anything that bites is going to be transmitting bacteria. So arming yourself, keeping your system strong, staying healthy, keeping your immune system healthy, and doing that extra protection with the herbs. So it's really important.
Just a few minutes left here with Dr. Rawls. You brought up chiggers. I was cutting the grass a couple of years ago, and gnats or chiggers, small little no-see-ums, whatever they were. I had a short sleeve shirt on. It was pretty warm, and they were just ferocious, and they were biting me all over the place. And a couple hours later, I was in the bathroom washing my hands, and I looked in my bicep, and I had the red lines. People call it blood poisoning or whatever. I don't think that's technically what it is, but I had those red lines from those bites, and it kind of scared me just a little bit. I think I threw Neosporin on it, and that seemed to clear it up. But what do you suppose? It could be an allergic reaction,
but it also could be bacteria of some kind entering your system. Yeah, there's no doubt about it. So, and by the way, too, these herbs that I've been talking about, Japanese knotweed, Chinese skullcap, cat's claw, these various different herbs. Interestingly, last year, some scientists at Johns Hopkins University looked at these things to see if they actually kill Borrelia. They had heard about people using them for Lyme disease. And so they did a test tube study where they took the various forms of Borrelia, the motile forms, the cyst forms, and dumped them in a test tube with tinctures of the various herbs, and compared that to doxycycline and another antibiotic type of cephalosporin. Interestingly, they found that the herbs killed the bacteria better than the antibiotics.
Really?
We do have a lot of evidence that these things truly do actually kill the bacteria, and they do it as well as the antibiotics do.
I mean, anytime you can put something natural in your body versus, some sort of chemical, I'm all for that.
Makes a lot of sense, yeah.
When you break it down like that, it makes the most sense, really.
Yeah.
But, I wanted to ask you about Heartland virus as well. Speaking of that Lone Star tick, is this something new?
I think it's been around a while. And again, I think it's one of those things that we're just starting to recognize. It's not very common. And so the less common something is, the less resistance we're going to have. It just means that it infects less often. So I was speculating that. We were talking about Heartland virus the other day, and it's like, well, why are some microbes more common than others? And it could be just competition between the microbes, right? So it could be that some microbes are just better at getting out ahead and getting into the bloodstream than other microbes. They might be present in a tick, but they might not make it to the person's bloodstream before these other microbes. So that's speculation, but that's a possibility. But Heartland virus, it's all about the types of cells that the bacteria or virus infects in the body, and that is the issue, all right? So Borrelia tends to go for tissue cells in the body that have collagen or produce collagen, nerve cells, muscle cells, whereas another bacteria called Bartonella infects blood vessels. And that's to deal with rickettsia also. So rickettsia, Rocky Mountain spotted fever, is really bad because it's not really any more aggressive than Borrelia, but it infects the cells that line small blood vessels. So if you get a load of that, and that's happening all at once, it can block off blood vessels, and that's where that spotted rash comes from, blocking blood vessels, but it can cause you to lose fingers and that sort of thing. But interesting, what I'm finding is, over the years of talking to people as we're doing more testing, what I'm finding is a lot of people with chronic symptoms are carrying the rickettsia microbe that causes Rocky Mountain spotted fever, but they never became acutely ill with Rocky Mountain spotted fever. And the same is true with Heartland. So it's the type of cells. So it's affecting immune cells, but it's affecting a specific type of immune cell that produce platelets, which is what we need for blood clotting. So if it is able to infect these cells, it can drop your platelet level and cause you to bleed out. But interestingly, most people who get this virus don't become acutely ill. So we just are learning how to test with these things. So through my career as a physician, I can tell you a lot of people showed up in the emergency room with odd kinds of things that nobody knew what was. And now we're starting to know a little bit more about maybe what's causing them. So it's not as much that these things are new, it's that they're newly discovered. We're just starting to find the causes of them. So that, we haven't been testing for these microbes very long, so we really have no idea whether the incidence of Lyme disease is increasing or not.
So how often would you recommend somebody that can't get, they're having some weird symptoms, doctor can't figure it out, would you recommend them trying to find a different doctor or trying to find some sort of Lyme literate doctor?
That's a kind of hit or miss thing. What I'm finding is that some of the Lyme literate doctors know Lyme disease and know what they're talking about, but an awful lot of them don't. And their knee-jerk reaction is to treat people for months and months and months on end with IV antibiotics, which can be highly destructive. I've seen many people's lives just ruined by that practice. So it's, the first thing I would do is get a copy of my book. You'll really understand what Lyme disease is better if you read the book. The book, Unlocking Lyme. I spent a lot of time. I took 2 years out of my life just to educate people to what this thing actually was and to help them understand what was going on. And quite frankly, I think a better route to go is herbal therapy for most people. I mean, that's your foundation. And most people with herbs will respond and actually start getting well and start reducing the symptoms. But, I wouldn't suggest that anybody just ignore or abandon the medical system. I think you need access to the healthcare system. I think you need a doctor on your side for things that might show not be associated with Lyme disease. I would hate for someone to think they had Lyme disease and actually have some kind of hidden cancer or other kinds of illness that needs to be treated in another way. So, but they ignored it. So I think you have to see the doctor. But if you have a lot of weird chronic symptoms that is being defined as chronic Lyme or fibromyalgia or that sort of thing, they're probably not going to be able to help you. But go for the evaluation. I mean, it's like when I was going through my thing, I had a lot of heart involvement. My heart was skipping beats every second to third beat, and I was having constant chest pain. And I was evaluated by a cardiologist, ended up with a cardiac cath. They found that my coronary vessels were clear, and they really didn't know what to do with me. And it was about that time that I found the Lyme microbes and started the herbs. So I was able to help myself, and gradually all of those symptoms resolved. But it was important. I mean, having had the cardiac cath and having that evaluation, I knew it wasn't a primary heart condition that needed to be addressed by the conventional medical system. So go for the evaluation. Try to turn every stone. And, when they've turned all the stones that they can turn, start going in a different direction and think about these alternative options that really have a lot of value.
The last question I want to ask you is, and maybe this is outside your wheelhouse, but dogs are affected by Lyme disease quite frequently, particularly hunting dogs. And there's a Lyme vaccine out there. I've heard people argue that it's not really effective. I give it to my dogs anyway, trying to give them every protection that I can. Is there some sort of, herbal plan, herbal type supplement that you could give to dogs to help them out?
Yeah, I think you can use some of these same herbs. I gave my dog herbal preparations for years. Our last dog started having arthritis symptoms when he was around 7, and I started giving him turmeric and cat's claw and some of these things. And he lived to be 14. And, his arthritis cleared up for a long time. So our other one is 7 now, and we've started giving him herbs. I think it is a reasonable thing to do. A lot of veterinarians, even more than conventional doctors, are using herbals. And there are a lot of herbal products for pets that are really, really good. As far as the vaccine, we may be doing some benefit there. I'm not opposed to vaccines, but it's one microbe probably among hundreds that ticks carry. So vaccinating for every potential thing that ticks are carrying, I think it's a losing battle. You end up running into more risk factors from all the different vaccines than you would from the actual bacteria.
Well, we're gonna live with ticks, whether we like it or not, and everything we can do to prevent it. You have a load of information on the website, rawlsmd.com, RAWLSMD.com, and that's where you can get the free book. That free book giveaway is through the month of May?
Yep.
Unlocking Lyme. And then the new book, Cellular Wellness Solution, that'll be coming out next month?
Yep. About mid-June. Yep. I think our formal date is the 21st. There's a lot of interesting stuff in there that truly it ought to interest anybody. I mean, this is your guide to staying well for your entire life. Hey, I thought my life was done when I was in my early 50s. I thought, I'd been physically active my whole life, and I thought that was it. I'm going to be compromised. I'm 65 now, and I'm doing anything I want. I'm kite surfing, hiking, whatever I want, which is really pretty cool. And truly, I think it's the herbs that put me there. But I've immersed myself in understanding why chronic illness occurs in a different way. And the conclusions that I've come up upon are very, very different than the mainstream community. And when you look at what herbs offer, man, are we overlooking this extraordinary resource that can reduce our risk of every chronic illness, cancer, everything, with virtually no side effects, and feel good, help you feel better, give you more energy. It's really remarkable.
Well, I sure hope so. That seems like a way better way to go than years of pills and treatments and doctor visits. So, all right, Dr. Rawls, I really appreciate the time. I think this is an important topic that needs to be discussed more often, particularly for people that spend a lot of time in the outdoor world like we do. Rawlsmd.com, once again, is a website. Doctor, thanks for being with us today.
Brett, thank you for the opportunity. I do appreciate it.
Devil's Lake is legendary, and this summer has been legendary for walleyes. Don't miss out. Call Haybale Heights Campground and Resort today to book one of their modern cabins on East Bay. The cabins are furnished with a full bathroom, kitchen, and all the amenities like high-speed internet, and are clean following CDC guidelines. Staying at Haybale Heights gives you full access to a private boat launch, fish cleaning station, and beach area. Learn more at haybaleheights.com. That's haybaleheights.com. Plan your trip to legendary Devil's Lake today.
All right, now we're going to head up to Otter Tail Lakes Country and check in with Randin Olson from Lockjaw Guide Service to find out how he's been catching fish lately. Randin, how's it going?
Pretty good, guys. Thanks for having me.
How are the water conditions up there? I know you guys have a ton of lakes. You got some rivers too, of course. We've got water everywhere down here. I know up north they got water going on. Are you running into any flooding problems at all?
There's a small handful of lakes that are kind of flooded over. The rivers are high, but the lakes are kind of back to normal, which is really nice after last summer, fighting that low water all year. Overall, I think we're sitting pretty well up here. We're pretty lucky in this area anyway.
With areas that you've gone to where you've fished in high water, have you been finding fish in their usual places, or have they been finding some new nooks and crannies to sneak into?
There's a few little nooks and crannies now with some of the higher water lakes. Riprap has kind of kicked on a whole new bite in some of these small lakes. Some of that beach riprap that's now in like 2 foot of water. There's fish up there, and they're using that riprap. So that's something to kind of keep your eye out for. Some of that shoreline stuff that's normally out of the water is now in the water. It's worth taking a pass through and seeing what you come up with.
You're a guy that's talked about shallow water walleyes quite a bit here on the show. Are you finding them shallow, or where are you finding fish right now?
They're deep for me. I've been finding them kind of 7 to 10 foot, which is pretty normal this time of year. I think this week we're starting to see. So yesterday we started to find fish up at about 2 or 3 foot. And I think a lot of that has to do is that the lakes are just now warming up enough where that shiner run is starting to really kick in. We're seeing low 50s, and that pushes those shiners up real shallow, and a lot of times those fish will follow them. Most guys sit out in that 7 to 10 foot because there's a lot of fish out there, but a lot of times your better fish are up right next to those shiner pods, chasing them around and eating them all day.
How easy is it to come by some of those shiners for bait?
It's tough. It's really tough this year. It's just a late spring. Bait dealers are having a hard time getting them. So what we've done a lot of, I end up staining my own, and I haven't had a problem finding golden shiners. Spot tails have been tough. Golden shiners will work just as good. So will fatheads. So will a lot of stuff. But spot tails kind of get the recognition this time of year. And if you're hung up on spot tails and you can't find them, plastics has been working really good too. I got a few options here that we've kind of been running. Quarter-ounce jig head and a nice big, anything that'll kind of imitate that shiner look. So silvers, whites, something like that. And then the reverse side of that we've been throwing is completely nothing like a shiner. So greens, kind of your perch color patterns, oranges, things like that. It's when they're so keyed in on something, sometimes ripping something completely different through there can really trip that trigger.
Are you mainly like pitching those, casting them? Are you trolling at all or dragging them, or what are you doing?
A lot of times this time of year, we're trolling them. We're kind of rip jigging them. And I think people hear the term rip jigging, and I don't know if they quite understand the whole concept of it. Basically, you're back trolling at about a mile an hour with a 16th to 8th ounce jig on, and you're not exactly ripping it like you'd rip into a hook set. You're more or less popping that thing along, but you never really let that bait settle either. So it's a good way to cover a lot of water and find those schools of fish. You can always go back and pitch at them. But jig trolling's a really good way. Rip jigging's a really good way just to find some fish this time of year and just eliminate dead water.
Are you using your electronics to try to find some fish, or are you locating some structure and trying to find some patterns?
So shallow water's a different one. Side imaging and like the live imaging sonars now. That's a great tool for finding fish up in shallow water. Your 2D sonar's not much useful up there. Mine is showing you kind of the weeds or bottom content. But side imaging can play a big factor this time of year. Basically, you can troll around, and when you get to learn your side imaging, you can tell if they're walleyes or if they're perch or if they're crappies. Last week before opener, we were chasing crappies, and that's all we did is we'd drive around until we seen a school in side imaging, stop, catch 6, 7, 8 of them. School would move, we'd drive till we find them again. So paying attention and kind of learning your electronics, that'll pay off big time, especially in shallow water.
Was that you? Did you post a picture of crappies on your side imaging recently?
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll see if Dan can track that one down. But that other picture that he just showed there, that was that midnight on the opener?
That was about 2 a.m.
Okay. But you went out there at midnight, though.
Yeah, we were out there at midnight running around, and boy, we tried a trophy lake. We do it every year for opener. We barely ever get anything to eat out of there. It's always big fish, but they were actually still spawning on that lake. You could see them right over the side of the boat. Yeah, they were grouped up. It'd be one female and 3 or 4 males rolling around with her. You drop a jig in a minnow in front of their face and they wouldn't touch it. So we ended up switching lakes and did pretty well then.
I'm just trying to find that. Is that picture on your on Lockjaw Guide Service?
Yep.
Lockjaw. Okay, I'll look for that. Interesting. So they were still spawning there, really?
And that lake is known to be kind of one of the last ones. We were only about 4 or 5 days after ice out when we got there. So we knew it was going to be close, but it's always worth a shot because there's some real big fish in there.
I think I saw that Eric Osberg said that he had gone out at midnight. Oh, there's the picture right there from 6 days ago. Yeah, there it is. Yeah, Dan's working on it. I always ask Dan to do way too much over there. Anyway, yeah. I can't tell. Is that on, or are you showing that now, Dan? I can't tell what I'm looking at. That's a pretty cool picture. That's a great picture to demonstrate because you're looking at shadows essentially there, right?
Right. Yeah. And I think the people, a lot of times people would waypoint those shadows, but those fish are a lot higher than what those shadows are showing. So those fish are closer to the boat than what it looks like.
I guess that would make sense because that shadow it'd be just like standing with the sun on one side of you. So how far away do you think where do you think those fish are actually then in that picture?
So those fish, they were about 20 to 30 foot off to the side of the boat, off the left side.
And what are we seeing the shadows at?
The shadows are closer to like 25, 30 to 50 foot.
Okay. So it's that big of a difference. That's interesting.
And we were in about 14 foot of water when I took that picture, so those fish were kind of up into the water column quite high. So that makes a big difference. I
finally made the switch to get some electronic society imaging this year. I haven't really had a need for it, but I couldn't be left in the Stone Age any longer. So I had to move up and get something. So I'm excited to try out some of these new improvements in technology out there. So I'm excited to dig into stuff like that right there, actually.
Yeah, it's almost hard to get not caught up in it. When you're going along a shoreline and you're seeing individual fish, it's hard to not stop and try to catch that one fish at a time. You got always looking for that super highway, that mega school of fish. And sometimes you can get caught up in watching the screen too much, but it's definitely a big plus. It big help.
Well, it's really amazing now what you can do with your electronics. And I mean, I guess I've caught so many fish that it's gotten boring for me. So I need something new.
What?
Yeah. I need something new to keep me occupied in the boat, and that's learning new electronics. No, it's funny, you talk to some of the old timers, they're like, I don't need any of that fancy equipment. And obviously, depending on what you're doing, you can go out and find fish without it. But man, it's so helpful to be able to see under the water and see what fish are doing, see where fish are, and to give you confidence in a spot. If you're there for a while and the fish you're not catching, but if you know that they're there, it helps you try to figure out what it's going to take to get them to bite.
Yeah, and I use it a lot in tournament fishing, pre-fishing for tournaments especially. Scan an area, you can get a judge for about how many fish are there. Size-wise, it's a little harder, but you can get a judge if the fish are there or not, and you don't really have to pester them by catching them. You can kind of leave them alone and just know they're there, and keep your tabs on them for a couple days before that tournament. So it comes in handy a lot.
Well, Randin, what's on tap for you? Going to be chasing walleyes, panfish, a little bit of both here in the future?
A little bit of both, mostly focusing on walleyes. That bite's going to stay really good through June at least, I think, with this water temp. So we got a long time yet to good walleye fishing, and it's going to be a fun time.
Do you got some openings this summer if people want to jump in the boat with you?
Yeah, we got some openings coming up in July. We're pretty booked up now through May through June, but July and August we got some openings. All you got to do is just give me a call at 218-640-0158.
All right, Randin Olson, Lockjaw Guide Service up there in Otter Tail Lakes Country. Good luck. Thanks for the time today on the show.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for having me.
Did you know there are more than 1,000 lakes in Otter Tail County?
Yep, and I'm going to fish as many as I can. I'm an outdoorsy otter. Nothing beats a full day of fishing for me. The lakes of Otter Tail County give me plenty of options to lower my boat and snag the perfect catch. Not an outdoorsy otter? No problem. Otter Tail County has something for everyone. You just need to find your inner otter.
To find your inner otter, go to OtterTailLakesCountry.com.
852 million acres of public land, 147 million private properties.
All in the palm of your hand. The #1 hunting GPS app just got better. With hundreds of custom map layers, 3D and topographic maps, you can easily scout on the road or at home before you go. And now you can get important weather details, CWD detection, and even know what crops have been planted where. Get the most trusted hunting GPS app ever made. OnX. Know where you stand with OnX. Well, due to a number of factors, including not having power around here and some bad weather conditions, Dan and I didn't fish for the opener yet. Didn't fish on the opening weekend, and really, as of this time, haven't fished at all yet since the season's been open. But I know a lot of guys have been out there. They've been catching walleyes, and we're going to find out how things went up at Lake of the Woods right now with Joe Henry from Lake of the Woods Tourism. Joe, how you doing?
Hey, Brad, I'm doing well.
How are the water conditions? Because water is out of control where we're at here. There's water everywhere. Roads around the house here are washed out. There's only one road into my place right now. I think it's starting to come back down a little bit, but we got quite a bit of rain again here this week. And I know the Rainy River has been pretty high, and the Red River is really high right now. How's it up at Lake of the Woods?
Just like Lake Wobegon. Everything's great. Everybody's getting along,
Good.
No. I'll tell you, and much like other parts of the region, we do have a lot of water in our system. So the gates coming out of Rainy Lake that flow into Rainy River are wide open. The gates up at Kenora, Ontario, where Lake of the Woods goes out, they're wide open. We do have some of the resort docks are underwater, so of course resorts have taken measures to put, whether it's pallets or other sections of docks so people can get to the charter boats and things. There are a few accesses to our east of Bret, way over there, that are getting a little bit flooded. Some are usable, some aren't, but like Wheeler's Point is golden, that's great, and other resort accesses. So you know what, there's some things that aren't perfect, but people are getting out fishing, and boy, thankfully fishing's really good.
Yeah, my goodness. I've got a few friends that were up there this week, and I got some messages from them showing them just hammering walleyes up there, Joe.
It's been good. It was, we thought it would be a good opener. It's normally a good opener. And, with a late spring like we had, there were a lot of walleyes in the river still. Now, the challenge was that current is ripping so hard that it was hard to go in a main river hole and fish them, because literally I talked to one guy that had a 1 ounce jig, and he said you just get swept downstream. And what they ended up doing, it was real interesting. What they ended up doing is they ended up finding some slack water closer to shore, and they could go in there with, like a 1/2 ounce jig and do just fine in that slack water. But one thing about that rushing water is that it can be a pro and a con. Now, it can take a lot of the spots that you would normally fish out of commission in some ways. But the other thing is, when you do find walleyes, a lot of times they'll be congregated because they're all kind of focused in the same areas. So once they found the walleyes, they whacked the heck out of them. They just had to find them at first. I will tell you too that the reports on the lake. So a lot of people go out in front of the Lighthouse Gap, out in front of Pine Island, and fish that area. And there are a lot of fish caught out there. There are a ton of fish out there. The water was a little dirty because of the Rainy River pushing so much water, and that's been running at flood stage. So it's pushing some dirty water through as well. So that made fishing a little bit tougher. Still caught fish, but it was a little bit tougher. So for instance, I spoke to some guys who said that they slid over to the west a little bit, and although they didn't find as many walleyes because the water was a little clearer, a much larger percentage of the walleyes they saw in their electronics bit. They were spread out. I mean, some people fish 4 Mile Bay in 6 feet of water. Other people are fishing out in the lake in 20 feet of water. So from about 6 to 20 feet was kind of the go-to. Jigging a minnow, bright jigs because of some of the stain in the water, and a lot of big fish caught. I mean, the eaters were caught, the smalls were caught, but then the slots and some trophies, and there were a lot of big fish caught for the opener.
I hear about shiners, of course, up at Lake of the Woods and the Rainy River quite frequently. And I've heard more about using plastics in the river in recent years. For whatever reason, and maybe I'm just blocking it out for whatever reason or just haven't heard it, but I don't hear about guys using plastics as much on the lake as I have in the river, but I'd assume plastics would work out there as well.
I think they will. And, I can tell you, like, for instance, up at the Northwest Angle, a lot of our folks that go fishing up there, some will fish the Minnesota side, and some will slide over into Ontario waters of Lake of the Woods and fish that area. So when that happens, it's one of those things where they have to use plastic. You cannot bring any kind of live or dead bait across the border from the United States into Canada anymore. Even night crawlers that are packed in bedding instead of soil used to be okay, but not anymore. Frozen bait, frozen minnows used to be okay. Dead minnows used to be okay, not anymore. It has to be all dead. Now, with that being said, people have been forced to use plastics, and at least up in the islands area, they've done very, very well, and they've been actually very happily surprised. Hey, there's pros and cons. One thing about a plastic, nowadays, with some of the different Berkeley products, and there's others, but they got it impregnated with scent. They got all different paddle tails, twister tails, all different colors. You can cast them without your bait falling off. If you're jigging over the side of the boat and you get hit, you set that hook. Well, if you had bait, normally your bait would be off. That walleye is still hot even though it missed it. You can drop that plastic down for round 2, and usually that fish is hot. They'll give you another shot at it. So there are some pros to using plastics, and so that, I do know some people on the main lake that use plastics. Most are still using live baits. I'll tell you this, when I fish tournaments on Lake of the Woods and I'm jigging over the side of the boat, oftentimes what I'll do is I would call it the full meal deal, but I would use a jig with a plastic on it. I'd use like a Emerald Shiner Berkeley Gulp Alive, and I would put that on my main jig, and then I'd put a frozen emerald, I'd put a piece of night crawler, Then I'd put a spinner hook. Then I'd put 2 half frozen shiners on, one on each hook, and then the third hook I put another piece of night crawler. It looked like a bulka, just crazy, but bulked up in that stained water and looking for bigger fish. So I'd be jigging that, and fish loved it. And then, when I'd set the hook and miss one, I still had that plastic on there. So if that fish was still hot, I still had that profile. They'd come back and hit me again. It's funny. I told that to one of the locals up there, and he said, "Al, that's only the 2/3 full meal deal. You forgot the leech."
Oh yeah, it's like opening an all-you-can-eat buffet and just casting a wide net, trying to get something to bite. We fished a lake last year. Dan and I were fishing, and we were in a congregated kind of community hole, and nobody was catching fish around us, and we're all using minnows, fatheads or creek chubs or something, I'm sure. And we switched to plastics, and all of a sudden we started catching walleyes, and everyone was kind of side-eyeing us just a little bit, and we're trying not to show them our secret a little bit, but caught some pretty nice fish. And the plastics that day, whether it was something different or what the deal was definitely the ticket. Joe,
I got to tell you though, Bret. I will say this too. Don't you think a lot of it has to do with confidence?
Well, I was losing confidence in the live bait that day and wanted to try something different. And there is a plastic that I have that's kind of a go-to on that lake, and I've got a lot of confidence in it because it's done real well for me.
I just think that you just have to get out and try stuff. I was talking to a friend of mine who. So a buddy of mine from high school in central Minnesota has a small company called, I'll just tell you, it's real small, Lena Lures. It's a bass fishing company, but he's got some different swim baits and stuff. And when we were out bass fishing together, which is totally against my religion, if you don't understand, I'm a walleye guy, so we give each other a hard time. But I told Todd, I said, it's just a swim bait, right? He goes, Joey, those swim baits are so good. All you got to do is cast it and reel it. You don't have to get fancy with jigging it, and they're fairly weedless. You can cover water, and everything will hit them. And that's coming from a bass guy who accidentally catches nice walleyes doing that. And really, from the walleye world, all a swim bait is to us is just a paddle tail on a jig. That's all it is.
Yeah, right.
So, this time of year, sometimes you don't want to get real fancy jigging it. You almost want it just coming through the water nice and steady. A lot of times you'll catch more fish with that cold water.
Well, what did we see on McComas or Target Walleye they had a 29-inch walleye on there. They were bass fishing
with chatterbait.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, and in fact, I saw James Linder give a presentation at an NPA, National Professional Angling Association, meeting, and his whole presentation was catching a lot of nice walleyes on bass tackle. He talked about chatterbaits. He talked about wacky worms. He talked about, you know what I mean? So, but part of that is you're fishing in areas sometimes with those baits that you wouldn't normally be fishing walleyes. A lot of it's thicker weeds.
That's where you'd find the walleyes sometimes, and they're so hard to get in there to catch. You brought up crossing the border, Joe, and somebody asked me about this. A lot of people are starting to think about going to the Canadian side. Now that things are a little more relaxed. They're still not completely relaxed. I know there's some people out there that are still wondering about vaccination statuses to cross the border, and I know every month they make decisions on border. Have you heard any type of rumors or any type of chatter about maybe changing things, or do you think it's going to stay the same for a while?
I haven't heard anything. I think, and just to make it straight right now as we speak, you got to be vaccinated. You got to use the Arrive Can app. You do not need a COVID test to go up. So that's kind of where things stand. I've not heard any changes. I'll be meeting with the Canadian Consulate and Canada Border Services Agency later next week, I guess. So yeah, I'll find out more. But you know what? I've heard nothing on the radar screen right now. It is what it is. And, I know some people that have actually gotten vaccinated because they want to get into Canada.
Yeah. Well, yep. I know a lot of people, and I know a lot of people that haven't got it that aren't taking trips to Canada because of it. So curious to see as the summer fishing tourism season begins, if anything else will change up there or not. But if nothing else, we'll just go back to Lake of the Woods.
Well, I'll tell you, it's so funny because we have a tale of two lakes, right? So on the south end, our south end resorts have been benefiting a little bit from some of the people not going to Canada because they go to the next best thing in their minds. And then our northwest angle resorts, that's where you have to travel 40 miles through Canada and then re-enter back into the United States if you're going to go there by vehicle. So that area in some ways have been hurt, just like the Canadian resorts have been hurt, because in essence, you're going, now the only caveat to that is that you can get up to the angle by staying in the U.S. if you go by boat or by plane. But other than that, so we've had our struggles up in that part of Lake of the Woods as well.
So before we let you go, Joe, we got to bring up sturgeon just because I saw Darren Troseth just put up a YouTube video this week. And when he posted about it, he said, a fun trip to the Rainy River with about as many big fish as I cared to catch. We didn't keep track, but I'm guessing about 40 total for 3 days of fishing. Yeah, I know it's way too long of a video, but whatever. and he was posting all these big fish pictures. I mean, just some big sturgeon. And then he was starting to edit, and he was asking for help. Like, hey guys, I got a lot of big fish that we're fighting in this video. Do you want to see the whole fight? Because the video is going to be really long. And I commented, like, when I edit fish videos for some of these big fish, if it's a 15-minute fight, at some point it's like, all right, you're going to fast forward or it's going to be too long or you're going to lose interest. So I end up having to try to edit creatively, like most TV shows that are, confined to 22 minutes of broadcast time. You have to get creative in some of those fish fights. Of course, YouTube, you can do whatever you want, but man, he hammered big sturgeon up there, Joe.
I'll tell you, I saw one post or one comment from some anglers. They said, and their comment on Facebook was something to the effect of, the freaking Rainy River is the real deal when it comes to sturgeon. We had 30 fish today,
oh, yeah.
So that, some people really hit it this year. And, it just goes to show that it's possible. Those fish are in good numbers. We got a lot of big fish again this year. It bodes well. And I'll tell you what, right now the sturgeon season's closed. It closed May 15th was the last day. It's going to be closed until July 1st. And then July 1st, it opens up again all the way into the fall, and that's the keep season. So if somebody ever wanted to come up and keep one that's between 45 and 50 inches or one over 75 inches, one per calendar year, you could come up and get one, and some people smoke them, and other people just choose to let them go. We have enough fish in the system that if you wanted to keep one, trust me, the DNR is watching it real close, and the population's just fine.
Yeah, the good old days are here, I think, for sturgeon fish, and they just keep getting better year after year. Well, Joe, if people want to learn more about making a trip to the Rainy River or Lake of the Woods, or they want to get more info about season dates and regulations, you post all that stuff, too, on your website and social media?
Yeah, you know what? We have a real active, Instagram and Facebook page. Just search Lake of the Woods Tourism. And, our resorts are also real good resources for information. Otherwise, our website, we try to keep real active, real current, and that is lakeofthewoodsmn.com.
Sporting Journal Radio is a division of Macaba LLC. If you've got a question, comment, or story idea for us, send us an email. Go to sportingjournalradio.com. While you're there, you can learn how to advertise on the show and visit our store for hats, hoodies, coffee mugs, and more. Go to sportingjournalradio.com.